Passmark's performance test, which you can download yourself and try out for 30 days. I'll leave a link in the description below. It's a pretty simple program to run. You can benchmark your entire system by clicking on this, or you can benchmark each aspect individually. For the purposes of this, all we're really interested in is the CPU mark and the memory mark. The rest of this stuff doesn't really affect the CPU. For the comparison, I'm going to use my own system, which is an i7 6700K, and it says here that it's at 4 GHz, and down here we can see the 4.2 GHz turbo, but in actual fact this PC runs at 4.2 GHz because it has a multi-core enhancement as default in the BIOS. I wasn't actually aware of this, but my PC has been running basically overclocked at 4.2 GHz on all cores, where it should only be running at 4.2 GHz on one core, as that is what the turbo on the Skylake 6700K should be. So if you're going to be benchmarking CPUs soon, make sure you check that out and you're not handing over some free performance to Intel. Now, like I said, you can click on CPU mark, and if you click on run, it will run through all this. So long as you're not running the entire suite every time, it only takes a minute or two. But here are some that I did earlier. On the left is my i7 6700K at 4.2 GHz and with a 3 GHz memory speed. The big box at 12,310 is the overall CPU mark. And within the CPU mark is a bunch of smaller tests, for example integer maths and prime numbers. Below that we have the memory mark, which does the same thing. It tests memory latencies and stuff like memory reads and writes. Now on the right hand side we have the Ryzen sample, and if we just compare the CPUs right now, instantly we can see a higher CPU mark for the Ryzen CPU. Now this won't be any kind of surprise because we're talking about a 4-core 8-thread CPU in the 6700K up against an 8-core 16-thread Ryzen CPU. So if the Ryzen CPU wasn't winning this, it would be a bit of a disaster. You may however feel that only winning by 22.5% isn't all that great. Some of the individual scores however are very interesting. If you compare the integer math, the Ryzen CPU is almost twice the score. You may know that when it comes to CPU scaling in terms of cores and megahertz, it is very rarely linear, especially with cores. There are always inefficiencies, and there's a thing called Amdahl's law, and simply put, adding more cores very rarely results in linear performance gains. But in this case, at twice the cores, twice the threads, the Ryzen CPU has almost twice the score. Looking at the prime numbers, 37 each, that doesn't look very good for the Ryzen CPU. Compression looks okay at around 50% higher. Physics, however, is worse, and we'll figure out what's going on with that one soon. One of the more interesting numbers is the CPU single-threaded score, with the Skylake 6700K being 20% faster with a score of 2540 compared to 2046. Again, we see a very large lead for the Ryzen CPU in floating-point math, and decent leads again in extended instructions, encryption and in sorting. In quite a few of these there's around about a 50% lead. Overall, the Ryzen sample looks extremely strong in integer and very strong in floating point as well. But what's going on with the prime numbers and the physics scores? Well, the memory mark gives us a clue to what is going on, with the Ryzen sample being very far behind. Now, one of the culprits here appears to be BoostBox's choice of memory. This is not particularly unusual. The fact of the matter is, most people buy PCs based on simple numbers. And by simple, I'm talking about stuff like the name of the CPU, the number of cores, stuff like the video card, and then they're more interested in stuff like the amount of RAM and the speed. In this case, we're talking about 16 gigabytes of RAM at 2.4 GHz. Pretty bog standard stuff. The RAM timings, however, were not very good, but this is stuff that the average PC buyer has no idea about. If you're one of these guys like BoostBox, you can save a little bit of money by using cheaper motherboards, cheaper memory, and most people will be none the wiser. So this is kind of what's happened here. You've got the big check boxes in the GTX 1080, the 8-core CPU, and you've got some pretty inferior RAM in there. We can see that it is making quite a bit of a difference. My i7 6700K, with its 3 GHz memory and decent timings, has a memory mark of 3413, whereas the Ryzen sample's memory is way down at 855. The memory writes are about half as fast, and the latency of the Ryzen sample is extremely poor. Now, AMD has had one or two issues with memory latency in previous architectures, and this could be coming back to haunt them again with Ryzen. I'm just not quite sure about that yet. But what I decided to do, in order to try and even this up a bit, was underclock and loosen the timings on my own PC's memory, to get them as close to the Ryzen sample as possible, and here was the result of that. Now straight away we can see that memory does have quite a marked effect on some of the scores, even the CPU mark, which is down by 3%. Stuff like integer maths hasn't really changed that much, but interestingly, prime numbers are down from 37 down to 33, and the physics score is down from 853 to 761. Nothing else in the CPU mark has changed very much, but if you remember the Ryzen scores, the prime numbers and the physics scores of 37 and 726, these were the worst two scores, and they very much appear to depend on the memory speed and latencies. Going back to the 6700K,
we would like to improve the services that we offer to our customers by asking you to complete
off the scores of the memory mark and a bit more in some of the tests. So the smart thing from now on is to use these numbers here with the memory at 2.4 GHz when comparing against the Ryzen sample. So I'm going to get rid of these and use this as my baseline. Now overall, the Ryzen sample is now 26% faster. The prime numbers are a little bit higher now, but it's still losing out in physics, and even though I reduced the memory performance on my Skylake CPU, it's pretty clear that the memory mark is still well ahead of the Ryzen sample. There does appear to be an issue here with memory latency. 76? That is way worse than this 22. To be frank, I am no expert on memory by far. I do not know what's going on here, but I will try to find out. We've had a look at the memory, but the really interesting comparison is, of course, the CPU. And there's more to it than just the number of cores and number of threads. I already mentioned the 4.2 GHz, and once again, by using the leaked baseline, we could see the speed of the CPU, which was listed at 3.4 GHz with a non-available turbo. It was also running on an A320M Pro motherboard. So I'm going to talk a bit about this stuff now before moving forward. Right, so let's start with the motherboards. All the Ryzen CPUs will run on AMD's AM4 platform, and you'll get motherboards at different segments, different prices, but all of them the same AM4 socket. Now up at the top you've got the X370, for the mainstream you have the B350, and what AMD calls Essential at the A320. There will also be X300 and A300s, which are small form factors, but we haven't seen any of those motherboards yet. Right now the only motherboards we know about are the X370s, the B350s and the A320s. You can see how they're segmented. Only Crossfire and SLI on the Enthusiast boards, and only overclocking allowed on the Enthusiast and Mainstream, which means the A320s do not have overclocking capability. And you remember what I said about these PC boutique guys and saving money, right? A320 motherboard, A320M Pro motherboard, which is an MSI one. Exactly what this means, we still don't know. We do know for sure though that the CPU wasn't overclocked. Now what about the CPU itself? Well, we can see the OPN string here, and these numbers at the end, 38/34, are the single core turbo and the all core turbo, or the base clock. Now, you probably aren't aware of this, however, there is reliable information that the base clock and the all core boost clock will be the same. The 3.4 GHz base, 3.4 GHz boost clock, and in this case with the 3.8 GHz single core turbo, that will be the maximum single core turbo of the CPU. And unlike with the Intel CPUs, there are no intermediate stages, so the CPU has two default states of all core turbo and single core turbo. As always, it's not quite as simple as that. I will get to that in a minute. Now, there's also been a bunch of CPU leaks, and from other sources we already knew that there is at least one CPU with a base frequency of 3.6 GHz and a turbo frequency of 4 GHz. So we know that this sample in the Passmark benchmark is not the fastest Ryzen CPU, and we believe that it will in fact be the Ryzen 7 1700X. We talked a bit about the branding in the last Ryzen video. I'm not going to cover that again here, It's something I'll talk about in a future video. But looking at this table over at video cards, we can see 8 cores, 16 threads, 3.4 GHz base frequency, and a 3.8 GHz turbo frequency. So what is probably either the second or third fastest Ryzen CPU? And we still don't know exactly what the X means, but we think it may well stand for Extended Frequency Range. Now, you've met the extended frequency range before, but as a refresher, it's basically an extra boost, which rewards enthusiast cooling. And the extended part is basically all about it permitting frequencies above and beyond the ordinary precision boost limits. So for example, in this case, you'd have 3.4 GHz base clock and all-core turbo, and this here could be the 3.8 GHz single-core boost. But with the extended frequency range, the boost can rise even further, and it scales with the cooling solution, for example air, water and liquid nitrogen. And importantly, this is fully automated. There is no user intervention required. You simply need better cooling, and Ryzen will make use of it. But what we don't know is, will this also be available on the lower end motherboards like the A320? Or will it be limited to the B350? Or even the X370s only? Right now, we just don't know. It wouldn't appear to count as overclocking, so you may think that would be alright. However, I would be very, very surprised if it was available on the A320. This is going to increase power consumption as well. And on the lower end motherboard stuff, most OEMs, these system builder guys, they wouldn't want to risk it, because quite often on the lower end PCs, you also find lower end power supplies. We also got another leak showing that the 1800X, the 1700X and the 1600X will make use of extra cooling. And even though we believe that this leaked CPU in the Passmark benchmark is the 1700X, the fact that it's running on an A320 motherboard probably prohibits it from using extended frequency range. Again, we just don't know for sure though, not yet. Now you've probably figured out what all that was about. We've already seen what is the worst case scenario. Ryzen is actually on the left this time, and we saw my 6700K at 4.2 GHz, and that was the scores. Remember the CPU single thread which I said was interesting? And at 4.2 GHz it was 20% ahead. But the other really interesting one was Ryzen's massive lead in integer maths. But let's take what I consider to be the most likely scenario here, which would be the Ryzen sample 3.4 GHz all-core turbo and 3.8 GHz on the single-core turbo. So in other words, even though the Passmark benchmark suggests that turbo wasn't working, I believe it actually was. But I also believe that XFR, extended frequency range, is probably not available. So what we do have here is a 1700X, out the box, 3.4, 3.8 GHz. My 6700K, at those speeds and similar memory, can be seen on the right. The lead in CPU single thread has been cut to 8%, and the gap in the integer maths and floating point must be a bit of a worry to Intel. In quite a few cases here, it's starting to look like Ryzen is twice as fast with twice the cores, and it's not that far behind in pure single-threaded performance either. And finally, for those of you who dare to dream, if I'm wrong about the turbo, and this Ryzen sample, the 1700X, actually doesn't have turbo available to it, and doesn't have XFR either, and was effectively running at 3.4 GHz for the entirety of this benchmark, the 6700K at 3.4 GHz scores this. Ryzen would be ahead, even in single-threaded performance, versus the 6700K by 3%. The gap in the integer maths is now getting closer to 3 times rather than twice. And obviously, it looks pretty good for Ryzen in the rest. Just what I say, I really feel that this is unlikely. I just don't think that Ryzen will be faster in CPU single thread, but it's certainly an entertaining thought. So like I said in my last Ryzen video, there will be quite a lot of leaks. I'm not entirely convinced that this was a leak. I've got the feeling that AMD has sort of planned this from the start. It's just all a little bit too convenient to get this leak, but the reality of it is we are none the wiser. And it's all really down to this A320 motherboard. We just don't know if XFR is working, we don't know if turbo was available. And what that's meant is we could be looking at a situation where Ryzen is 3% faster in single-threaded performance, or Skylake is 20% faster in single-threaded performance. I do, however, feel that the reality is probably a little bit closer to the middle of those two numbers. There will undoubtedly be even more leaks coming over the next week, and you all probably know by now that the launch is not that far away. By my reckoning, you're talking maybe a couple of weeks, so you can really expect the leaks to come thick and fast. And they will be real leaks this time. I've been collecting a bunch of parts, and I will have my test bench built and ready to go. All I need now is an AM4 motherboard and 1 or 2 Ryzen CPUs to go along with it. I'll catch you later, guys.
I miss it already. Dragoon.
The time is almost here. The release of Horizon Zero Dawn is right around the corner. I'm Andrew, the new guy. And today in GameRanks, we're here to talk about 10 things that you need to know about Horizon Zero Dawn. And up first, number 10, we have the setting. About 50 years from our present time, Cataclysm hits. What exactly happens, we don't know yet. Hopefully by the end of the game, we get to find out, but Horizon takes place 1,000 years after that. Whatever happened, humanity reverted back to the hunter-gatherer way of living off the land and such. And for some reason that we don't know of yet, the land is populated by giant mechanical beasts that resemble dinosaurs. So I guess it's safe to think that maybe Skynet finally took over, and our technology somehow turned on us. But why these giant dinosaur-looking mechanical creatures? We also don't know exactly where the game takes place geographically, but Guerrilla Games managing director Hermen Hulst did confirm that there will be some real-world references, but he couldn't tell us exactly what. But how cool would it be to see like a rundown Hollywood sign or maybe a crazy overgrown Manhattan? I know these are on 2 different coasts, but I think you get what I mean. The mystery surrounding the game's setting is probably one of the things that has me the most interested and curious about this game, and I really want to know where it takes place and what happened that destroyed modern civilization and turned us back into cavemen. And up next, number 9, we have Aloy. So in Horizon, you play as Aloy, and yes, that is how you pronounce her name, not Alloy. Anyway, you play as Aloy, a member of the Nora tribe, but she is cast out of the tribe for not having a mother. She never knew her parents, and she was raised by another outcast named Rost. And the two live in the wilderness and aren't allowed within certain areas of the tribal grounds. At the beginning of the game, Aloy is coming of age, and she's fed up with not knowing who her parents are and what reasons that she was deemed an outcast of the tribe. So she decided to take part in the rite of passage of its proven. And completing this passage means she will no longer be an outcast, and it gives her a chance to get some answers from the leaders of the tribe about her past. And while the rest of her tribe doesn't fully understand technology and how to use it, Aloy does. She drives herself to study and learn about it as much as she can. She's actually the first one to learn how to override the beasts and tame them. And seeing that she grew up in the wilderness, she grew up learning how to craft, scavenge, hunt, and defend herself, and all of those are going to tie into the gameplay. Aloy is shaping up to be a very interesting character, and I'm really excited to learn her story and welcome her to the PlayStation roster. And up next, number 8, is the game's engine. Horizon is going to be the debut of Guerrilla's new Decima engine. Now, if you've seen gameplay footage of Horizon, and I'm sure most of you have, you can't deny how pretty this game looks. Guerrilla's managing editor, Hermen Hulst, had this to say about the Decima engine. It's a lot more than just a rendering engine. It involves AI, physics, logics. It's got the entire world creation tool screen in it. And I'd argue that the engine probably is a statement of philosophy of game development as well. So he seems to be hyped about it and have a lot of faith in it, but then again, it is kind of his job to feel that way about it. But what's really interesting about the Decima engine is that our Lord and Savior Hideo Kojima has built a partnership with Guerrilla Games and will be using that engine for his upcoming game. And the reason I bring this up is that if Hideo is choosing to use this engine for his next game, then it really has to be something impressive. I mean, look at the Fox engine that was used for that game. That was an amazing engine. Almost everything about that game, from a gameplay perspective, definitely not a narrative perspective, is almost perfect. And most of that has to do with the Fox engine. And it's a shame that he couldn't take that tech with him when he left Konami. If Hideo is impressed with this engine and impressed so much with it that he's going to use it for Death Stranding, then there's got to be something really special about the Decima engine. And up next, number 7, is how the game will run on PS4 Pro. Horizon is going to be taking advantage of the PS4 Pro on both 4K and 1080p displays. Guerrilla will be using super sampling to make the game look better on 1080p displays. It's an anti-aliasing technique where they internally render the game at a resolution that is close to 4K before actually scaling it down to 1080p. And by doing this, some of the detail of that higher resolution survives the scale down, giving you a more stable image, less jaggy lines, and just a better look. And for 4K TVs, the game will be rendered at 2160p checkerboard. And if you want a good explanation of that, I think only Mark Cerny can do that justice, so go find him talking about it. It's actually a really cool technology. The game will also support HDR if your TV is capable, and HDR really heightens your color range, giving you deeper and brighter colors. And for a game like this, playing it in HDR will most likely be stunning. So hopefully Horizon can really show what the PS4 Pro is capable of. Then up next, number 6, we have the skill tree. This wouldn't be an action RPG without some sort of skill tree, and Horizons is broken down into 3 different skill trees, each one made for a specific playstyle. There's the Prowler tree that has stealth-based abilities, the Brave tree which focuses more on combat, and the Forager tree that focuses more on gathering and hunting. You'll be able to unlock a ton of different abilities like slowing down time when you're aiming your bow, silent takedowns, luring enemies, silently sprinting, double shot, finding more resources, and upgradable pouches. It's a pretty straightforward skill tree that really lets you favor the kind of playstyle you want to go with. And up next, at number 5, you have hunting and crafting. Hunting and crafting play a huge role in Horizon. You'll be tracking down real and mechanical beasts to get resources that will allow you to craft gear. The resources from real animals let you craft stuff like pouches, and resources from robot dinosaurs can be used to upgrade armor and weapons. And those resources are also a huge part of the economy. You can use those resources to trade with tribes throughout the map. There's also hunting lodges that can be found, which is pretty much like a hunter's guild, and each one has a representative that will give you access to different challenges. By completing those challenges, you gain access to the lodge, and you can start moving up in the ranks. Next up, on number 4, we have other side activities. Along with what comes from the hunting and crafting element of Horizon, there are a ton of different side activities within it. There are corruption zones that are filled with hostile machines that are more powerful than enemies outside of the corruption zone, and completing these will make exploration a bit more safe, and you also get a good chunk of XP, and will also make objectives in the surrounding area a little easier. There are also several different tribes in Horizon, each one having their own religious beliefs and their own views on the world and the technology living in it. You'll be able to complete special tribal missions that will help you learn more and understand each tribe a little better, and there will also be random quests that you come across while exploring the wilderness. And completing these random quests will gain you XP or even weapon upgrades. Combining the hunting lodges, these side activities, and main missions, and